Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Michelle and today we have with us Paul. Paul.
Hello, otherwise known as the Catholic Nintendo Nerd, if you want to check out my YouTube channel.
Yes, and that name very well speaks to what your channel is about. um,
Okay, yeah.
Paul is an ISTJ, and so we are going to kind of get to ask him some questions, and at the end, you guys will get to ask him some questions. So we're pretty excited to chat and hopefully break down some stereotypes about ISTJ because my goodness, there
There
are a
are a
lot of
lot of
stereotypes.
them. So, first and foremost, right off the bat, I just want to say I'm not the stereotypical mean old boring routine ISTJ that all of you guys are worried about. Like, sometimes I can appear that way, but I think that's inaccurate for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah,
depends what's going on, really.
you said what? I'm sorry.
It depends on what's going on, because, like, for example, I volunteer with well, I did until they had to cancel the conference we were working on.
Mm-hmm.
I was working with middle schoolers for over a year, and you have to be pretty strict with them because their attention span is like that of a goldfish.
How old did you say? Middle school?
Middle schoolers,
Yeah.
yeah, so that was a bit frustrating.
Yeah. What were you doing specifically with the middle
We
schoolers?
were working on a conference for middle schoolers that the middle schoolers themselves were planning. So those of us on the older side had to get out our canes and be like, "You young whippersnappers, you need to behave the rules and respect your elders," and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, I can imagine they weren't too fond of that. I remember when I was in middle school, I was not a big fan of people telling me what to do.
But when you're planning a conference, you have to have structure. Otherwise, the
Right.
conference is gonna, it's not actually gonna happen. So, are
Yeah.
we talking to ourselves or the people just like being shy right now? Because it doesn't look like anyone is here yet.
Oh, Master Matt has just said hello.
Oh, hello, Master Matt. I actually have a good friend of mine whose name is Matt, and he's an ENFP, and I really love being around him. He's actually the husband of my friend Danielle, who's also an ENFP. So
Oh wow, double
they
ENFP energy. Oh
oh
man.
my gosh, I love it. Maybe
So
not all day, but like a good portion of the day would be fine.
okay. So what would you say is like your acceptable level of like being around the ENFP energy?
Uh, I would say as long as there's not too many of them, like maybe if I was around like maybe 3 at the most would be okay. But if it was like a humongous group, I would be overwhelmed pretty quickly. I don't
Mhm.
really like groups in general, but sometimes if it's for a special occasion, I'll make an exception, but I won't want to do it all the time. Like for
Okay.
example, I chaperoned the conference back in February, and that had 600 people.
Oh wow.
But I wasn't interacting with all 600 at a
Mhm.
time. It was all in small bursts, and if it got too loud, I just walked out of the room.
Oh, that would be nice to be able to just leave when it's too much.
Well, I tried not to do that very much because I was in a chaperoning capacity, so obviously I
Mhm.
had responsibilities. I had to devote about 90% of my time to the teenagers. This was high school. This was way better than middle school.
Mhm,
I had to
mhm.
devote my energy to those teenagers first and foremost, and me time was sort of it had to be during the scheduled free times of the conference. So I couldn't just at any time I wanted say sayonara folks. I had to go by the agenda, which I love. I love agendas.
Mm. So you said that you love earlier before we started, you said that you really like giving speeches and having Q&As, but you
Mhm.
don't like having notes and having to prepare it too much. Have you ever had a speech where you're just able to talk extemporaneously without a cards in front of you?
Well, my YouTube channel, like 99% of my videos are unscripted.
Okay.
In fact, the only video that I can think of off the top of my head that had a script was my review of New Super Mario Bros. Wii. But the
Mhm.
reason why I scripted that was that I was making a joke about how it was too similar to the original New
Mm.
Super Mario Bros. So I made the script based on the unscripted script of the previous video so that I could just copy it.
Oh, okay, so you could kind of mirror what was going on with the last video.
So I was basically making fun of the fact that the series is so uninnovative.
Oh, yeah,
But,
yeah.
like, when I gave speeches, they would insist that I at least wrote down a few things. But I always would say, like, I don't want to write down word for word what I'm going to say. I'd rather just do bullet points and expand upon them.
Yeah, that's actually what I do for my videos too. If I do a script, it's normally just bullet points because anytime that I have a script, one, I focus so much on like saying exactly what I've written that when I miss something while I'm speaking, it'll trip me up and I can't keep going because I'm like, oh no, I missed what I was trying to say. And then, yeah, the only time I would script, even still, like when I do script things, it's because I need to process it and I write it all down. And then when I actually go to film, I'm not even looking at my notes at all. I just had to do the work to get my mind in place.
Well, I guess for your function stack, that would really help because from what I hear, ENFPs are very idealistic. And so
Mhm.
you've constantly got a whole bunch of things you'd like to be thinking about, but you gotta stay focused for the sake of the audience.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting thing that we could compare because obviously I'm always thinking about a lot of things and I always have a lot of ideas, and it's really hard for me to actually do them. But I would imagine this is like my personal stereotype about an ISTJ that you wouldn't really struggle with that at all. You would know exactly what you want to do most of the time,
Mhm.
and it would be really, really odd if you were in that kind of predicament.
Well, actually, I would say that's only half true because
Mm.
I do have quite a lot of ideas that run through my head all the time, but I know how to differentiate between what's possible and what should stick to my imagination.
Can you give an example of that?
Well, for example, like I really love the concept of spirits in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. The fact that they couldn't make a whole bunch of models, but they still wanted all these characters in the game. So they just took the existing fighters and then just had the spirits of the character possess the fighters. So then
Mm.
I thought about like what other video game characters would be cool if they were replaced by an existing fighter. So, I was thinking about like, ooh, The World Ends With You. I'd love to see Neku make it in. And so I thought about like which character would best represent Neku. But then I
Mm.
realized I'm not a developer. I don't have any way of making that possible. That's just going to stay in my head.
Okay, so you're like doing thought experiments, but you know that it's just for yourself and really there's no way to actually implement it. So like how long would you let yourself go down a rabbit hole like that?
Mm, Usually I give myself about an hour, but then usually I don't end up lasting that whole hour because by then I'm like too tired and start going to sleep. That's
Ah.
usually that's usually how I get to sleep is I overthink something, and that process of overthinking makes my brain tired. And because I suffer from insomnia ever since I've been 13, that's
Mhm.
actually been one of my coping mechanisms to be able to sleep.
Oh, interesting. So this is an activity that you maybe wouldn't do during your regular life, like while you're working or while you're out
Oh,
and about.
during my regular life, that's what the introverted sensing takes over, which is
Mhm.
where I think about all 968 songs and I try to name all of them and I try to say like what game they're from, whether it's a remix, whether it's a new remix. And so I have this like gigantic shelf within my
Oh.
brain of like all these facts and information and like sorting out how they all fit.
Oh, wow. So like, are you saying that you would be playing the music and while the music's playing, you're trying to categorize that song as to like what it's from and where it's from and what
I'd
it.
be able to play the music, yeah.
Oh, so you're just doing that even without the music. You're just kind of like going through the list and
Oh,
that.
yeah.
So that's like what you're doing to keep your, because you said you were a dishwasher for 10 years.
That's
Um,
what I did to keep my sanity most of the time,
okay. So
was
while
I
you're,
would just pull up my mental iPod.
oh, that's so fascinating. Oh my gosh.
Fascinating, I thought everyone could do that.
No, to definitely not. I've worked at restaurants before, and when I'm doing dishes, um, I would definitely be thinking about my novel, like things that I could do to improve my novel. I'd be thinking about whatever world problems going on right now and ways that we need to solve it. Like even with the coronavirus right now, all I can think is like clearly we need to make a better system as a world, like to manage things like mass plagues. I'm not thinking about like how it's impacting my work. I'm not even concerned about that. That's all taken care of. What I'm worried about is like, what is the world going to do with this?
Well, the thing about the coronavirus for me is that I'm not a medical expert, and I
Mhm.
also am not in like an authoritative office type setting. So even if I had a grand idea about how to stop it, it's not really possible for me to do it. So I just say, well, okay, I am me, and I'm going to try to think like, what can I do right now as a preventative measure, which in my case is pretty much nothing because
Right.
I have like the world's greatest immune system. I don't even remember the last time I was sick. I think it was at least a year ago, maybe.
Yeah, I don't get sick very often either, but I also work from home, so I don't really interact with people in the real world too often.
I would like to work from home, but as it is, I think that would be a waste of my talents because I do a really good job when I'm like physically cleaning something or physically organizing
Mm.
something. And I feel like if I were on the computer all the time, that would be the antithesis of my need for being active. Not active all the time. And what I mean by active, let me be really specific here. I don't necessarily need to be constantly moving like the ESTJs do, but I do like to maintain a good level of exercise because that's, physical health.
That's so fascinating because, when you think of an ISTJ, like my mental stereotype is somebody who is doing like administrative work and who is doing something that's highly repetitive in that kind of way.
Well, can I interrupt you for a minute
Oh,
there?
yeah.
That's actually more so what the ESTJ would do. And that's actually what I
Mhm.
used to think I was because I can be so outgoing and boisterous. But the E is actually representing how you get your energy, not how outgoing you are.
Mhm.
But getting back to the administrative thing, administration is really a sort of a leadership type of thing where like you're organizing large scale events and you're making phone calls, reaching out. I'm terrible at that kind of stuff. I freeze up when like I have to make a phone call to someone I don't know.
Mm.
But what we like to do is more so of assistant type of work. So for example, if the administrator says, "Hey Paul, could you get me a cup of coffee?" or "Hey Paul, I need you to file some papers for me." That part I would be more okay with. But actually
Okay.
putting in the effort to be the leader, usually they say we're the reluctant leaders. Like
Okay.
they're the type that we're like, "Paul, you're such a good leader. Why don't you actually do it?" And we're just like, "Oh, I don't know about that." But then when we're actually forced to, we're actually pretty good at it.
Mm.
We're our worst critics. We don't give ourselves enough credit. So if you guys ever have your complaints about like, "Oh, those stupid ISTJs," likely we've already thought of it and have thought of it far worse.
Oh, wow. So it kind of sounds like a couple of things are happening there when it comes to like it sounds like you're wanting to like manage your energy in a certain sense, and so like being in a position of leadership would make it harder to manage that energy because you'd have to do things that maybe you're not as comfortable with. But it
Yeah.
also sounds like a lot of it is what's going on in your mind while you're doing these things, because I would think that an ISTJ, although you are like often thinking about, like you said, your lists of songs and all of like categorizing it all and organizing it all, you also are thinking about the future projections of things as well, right?
Um, to an extent, I would say I don't really like to think about the far future. Like, sure, I might plan like what's going on next week or next
Mhm.
month, but they're usually like more bullet points. So, for example, I might say hangout on Thursday, and that would be the extent of it.
Okay.
Or I'd say doctor's appointment on my calendar, but I wouldn't make this extensive, long listed plan like some of the introverted intuitives do. That just tires me out too much. I prefer instead to live on a semi-routine type basis where like
Mhm.
I'm used to doing things a certain way, so I'd rather just stick to that. And if I have to deviate, then I make a note to myself like include spontaneity here. So structured spontaneity.
Structured spontaneity, that's perfect.
So when I'm hanging out with my ENFP friends, for example, I'll like make a mental note to like try to be easygoing in that moment.
Okay. So that leads me to a question that I'm kind of curious about. So you said that you have a lot of ENFP friends, and you just said just now that you try to allow yourself not to be too, what's the word, rigid about everything. What are some times, or like maybe an example of a time when like one of those ENFP friends really frustrated you and you couldn't like contain it? Has that ever happened?
Oh yeah, all the time. but I would say it's not so much the fact that they're easygoing, it's more so of the fact that they're usually not very good at being punctual.
Mm.
Like a lot of times they're late to the hangouts, or they might forget that we had something scheduled, or they might say, like, sorry, we're running late because we totally lost track of time. And I'll just be like, come on, we had an agreement here, people. Why don't you actually honor your commitments?
So the biggest thing that frustrates you is not when you're actually hanging out, but the fact that maybe they're not respecting the situation that's been set up as much as you do, and they're not respecting the time that you've set up. How late would they have to be where you start feeling like that?
Sometimes even if it's a minute late, I start getting agitated.
Oh, kind
Well,
of like with our stream today when I started it at 12:01 accidentally.
well, 101 where I am.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that was a little bit of a pet peeve, but I've learned to sort of get over that because I realize that there are extraneous circumstances that just because I can't physically detect them doesn't mean they don't exist. So, for example, like maybe there was traffic, or maybe
Mhm.
they, wanted to get ready, but like they were like, Danielle, where did you put the toothbrush, kind of thing.
Right. So are you actively, is that something that you've always done, actively try to figure out maybe why they're late, or is that something more recent? Like what made you, or why would you do that, I guess?
I think it's just because I used to have a really hard time with anger management. And
Mm,
then after I realized that that was the most frequently confessed thing that I would say in the confessional, I decided I wanted to take a more calm approach. And
mm.
so nowadays, I hardly ever raise my voice or lose my cool. So
So
I
what
prefer instead to analyze first and then
mhm.
start yelling after I have all the facts. But even then, usually my friends offer a pretty decent explanation.
Okay. So when did this transition happen? When did you recognize, or and what, actually, I guess I'm more curious, what were you like when you got really upset?
Well, what if I ever got really upset?
Yeah.
I basically just told it like it was. I would say, like, for instance, why do ENFPs have to act like airheads so much? I mean, to a certain extent, I still say that a lot, but I'd be like even worse. Like, I'd make it into an actual insult. Like, I'd
Mm,
say, for crying out loud, we had an agreement. Why are you messing this up? Nowadays, I'd just be more like, did something happen that made it so that you are not honoring what we said? And that infuriates my brother like crazy because he like hates contractual agreements.
Oh, yeah. What is your brother an ENFP, or what is his
I'm not
type?
sure what he is because he doesn't really believe in the Myers-Briggs.
Oh, okay.
But if I had to guess, he's probably, I don't know. That's hard to say. I think he's probably maybe an ENFP, but he doesn't seem as crazy and sporadic as they are.
Okay.
He
So could
seems like an extroverted feeler, but he also seems like a perceiver at the same time, which is kind of counterintuitive.
mhm.
But anyway,
Yeah.
whenever I say like, "Let's make a deal," he's like, "No deals, Paul. You do this because we want you to do it." And it's like, "Want? Is there something in it for me?" So that's the
What's
introverted versus
lying?
extroverted feeling there.
Mm,
Like he
right.
says, "But Paul, it'll make me feel better." I'll be like, "That doesn't solve any problems."
That's so hilarious. Because you've commented a few times before about like your feelings with extroverted feeling. Can you kind of expand on how you feel about maybe your experience with people who are extroverted feeling, and how you relate to them, and what's good and what's bad about those
Yeah,
interactions?
well, personally, a lot of people with extroverted feeling infuriate me because they have a hard time explaining why they act the way they act.
Hmm.
So, as a result, it often comes across as unrequited stubbornness.
Mm,
So, like, they might have this really strong agenda, and when I'll ask them to clarify it, they'll just be like, "It is what it is, Paul, and if you don't like it, tough." Whereas,
mm,
like, at least, like, with, say, an INFP, sure, they have dominant introverted feelings, so they're very value-based, but they also have extroverted thinking, so they're
right,
gonna be externally processing their reasoning. So they
right,
can say, "This is why I believe what I believe," even if they
right.
can't explain what their beliefs are. Whereas INFJs, for example, they might say, "I'm afraid we cannot hang out. Won't talk to me again for another week."
Oh my gosh, that sounds very stressful.
because they don't know how to explain why
Right.
they wouldn't hang out. And also another thing is that they tend to like feed off of other people's energy, which I've tried really, really hard to do, but I just completely miss the mark at times
Mm-hmm.
where everyone else will say, like, this is such a tragic, terrible event. And I'll be like, I mean, yeah, but why are you all crying about it?
Yeah, I can relate to that a little bit too. But mine, I don't really know exactly how to say, but because I'm like trying to like keep the questions in my mind that came up from that. Oh gosh, what was I gonna say? Now I'm all
Jumbled around.
Yeah, I was thinking about so something that I've noticed is that for those of us who have introverted feeling, your intention is one of the most important things. Like when I hear what someone's intention is, even if they didn't do it exactly as they intended, I can be much more forgiving than somebody who doesn't maybe have a clear intention or isn't expressing their intention and they did it in a way that I don't understand. Then I get more frustrated with them than somebody that was intending good and maybe didn't do it perfectly.
Interesting way of wording it, but I think I'd probably have to agree if I thought on it a little bit more.
Yeah, maybe I'm sorry. I'm not the best at explaining things sometimes.
Not a problem. Introverted feeling is what I call the most frustrating function to have, because especially when it's in the tertiary, because that means it's like an example I heard from a former ESTJ friend of mine is you can describe the function stack by using ages. So
Mhm.
like the inferior function is the toddler, the well, I gotta have my way or no way. And then the tertiary is more like the teenage, angsty, still trying to figure it out. And then the secondary and dominant are more like the adult functions, like the ones that you use without even thinking about it.
Mhm.
So in the case of the tertiary function, it's like, I should be crying right now. I should be upset. This is a terrible thing, but the tears just are not coming, and I don't think it's worth it to cry in this moment. Or um, I might say, well, you know what? My values say this, but something tells me that maybe I shouldn't broadcast those values and instead just try to have more of a controlled front so that I don't appear like I'm an over emotional crybaby.
Mm. Why do you think you protect that image of like the potential of being a quote unquote like crybaby?
I think it's because people wouldn't take it as seriously if it came from a place of over emotionalism.
Mhm.
Because a lot of times, if something comes from emotion, it overrides reason.
Okay.
And see, that's what made us different from the animals, is like animals go all by instinct. So you could
Right.
say animals are like the definitive feeling types.
Right.
And because we're human beings, we have the capability for rational thought and also for intellect. And so my thought is if I'm a human, then I want to use what makes me human. And that is the capacity to use critical thinking and say, I don't think this is the best thing to do.
Mhm.
Whereas feelings are, of course, 100% subjective. You could be
Right.
feeling like you want to murder someone, but that doesn't make it right.
Right.
Which I guess is why introverted feeling really helps, because that's all about like questioning your emotions, saying like, should I act on it? But because I have extroverted thinking that's slightly above them, I might say like, well, okay, let me ask the church authorities if it's okay if I'm feeling upset right now. So
Oh wow.
that over reliance on authority, I guess, is one of
Mhm.
our biggest downfalls. A lot of people say, Paul, are you capable of independent thinking? I'll say, yeah, if the church gives me permission to.
If the church gives me permission, that's great. What I was just thinking while you were saying that is that I obviously have the opposite. So, like, my introverted feeling takes authority over my extroverted thinking. Did I say that right?
Yeah, you did.
Okay. I thought I said introverted thinking for a second. But something that I do a lot is I look at my feelings and I decide whether or not they're appropriate for what's going on. And then I choose whether or not I should give in to them or not. Sometimes I can't control it, obviously. But I realize that I do that a lot. I try to rationalize my feelings. And I've been realizing lately that I don't think extroverted feeling works exactly like that. And I think that's where a lot of like disconnect comes between the extroverted feeling and introverted feeling, is because we look at a feeling and we try to determine if it's appropriate and if it fits into like what should be done. Whereas extroverted feeling, I think, is more, the feeling is there. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. The feeling is there. So it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition we have between, the introverted feeling and the extroverted feeling, I think.
Yeah. One thing I really like about your type is like whenever I get into a discussion about thinking versus feeling, we're usually pretty darn close to how we approach it. It's once you talk about the sensing versus the intuition that there's a huge gap. And in fact, even within my INTJ best friend, like 3 letters the same, but that 1 letter difference means that he has dominant introverted intuition and inferior extroverted sensing, which makes all the difference in the world.
What kind of things do you guys argue about?
We argue about, usually when it comes to innovation, like
Hmm.
my best friend will say, "Oh, Paul, do we always have to take the same route to the park every single time we go on a walk?" Or he'll say, like, "I got this new game, Paul, you want to try it?" No.
So he's much more willing to try new things than you are.
But then on the flip side, I like have an insanely good memory and I notice everything. And I'll say like, "How did you not notice the stop sign?" I'll be like, "Oh, sorry, I wasn't paying attention." Or if I drive the wrong way on the road, I'll be like, "I don't think you're gonna crash into a car. How'd you not notice that?"
Oh my gosh, that's
They'll just be like, "Oh, I was too busy thinking."
Yeah, I've never done that. Either of those, definitely not. Never once. Uh, so, what I'm really curious of is, it sounds like you really know a lot about MBTI and typology. How long have you been learning about it, and what got you interested in it?
Well, it all started September 23rd, 2012 at 7:00 p.m. to
Oh,
be
wow.
precise. We were having a young adult meeting, and one of the people there was talking about how he was an ENFJ, and so he was talking about like what that all meant. And then the other people in the room were talking about their type, and I was like, "What are you guys talking about there?" And I said, "Oh yeah, it's called Myers-Briggs. You should take the test and see what you are." So I didn't think much of it at the time. I was just like, "Okay, let's see what happens." Got ESTJ. And I looked it up and I said, "Yeah, that's pretty much me." But then every time I took another test after that, I would always get ENFJ.
Hmm.
And I was like, from what I'm reading, I don't think that's me at all. Because then I joined an ESTJ Facebook group, hoping that they'd
Mhm.
be able to shed some light on this mystery. And instead, they just made things worse.
Oh, no.
Because I would always be showing off stereotypical ISTJ traits that I would say, "This is totally an ESTJ thing to do." And they'd be like, "No, it isn't." Like I'd
Mm.
be, listing off like nostalgic memories. I'd be like, "I remember 5 years ago when," and they're like, "Why are you dwelling on the past so much?" Or like I'd be like, "Oh, that is so sad. I'm really sorry to hear that." They're like, "Why are you being so emotional?" And so that led me to realize, the function stack makes sense, but the order doesn't. So then I narrowed it down by studying like what each of the functions did.
Mhm.
Because then I realized, if you go by the letters alone, you are not going to understand Myers-Briggs. You're going to be so totally messed up. So then after I studied like what is introverted versus extroverted feeling, what's introverted sensing, and then process of elimination also helped too. Because like once I figured out, dominant introverted sensing, I was like, duh, like that's not even in question for people that know me. And then so that left only ISTJ and ISFJ as possibilities after I narrowed that down.
Right.
And one could argue I could come across as an ISFJ at times, but I feel like it's the introverted thinking that trips me up all the time. The inability to explain your reasoning, that is totally not me at all. I am really good at vocalizing what I'm thinking. In fact, that's
Mhm.
actually the main reason why I have my YouTube channels. I hate keeping things in my head. I just want to get it out there and express my thoughts.
So, like, for you, one of the best things to express is your logic, your reason, your thoughts, more so than your feelings. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I would say so because usually my deepest, darkest emotions I reserve for like people I trust, or on the opposite extreme, people that I know for a fact I'm never going to see again. But usually that's like in a specific setting where I know that they have a certain mindset. Like, for example, if I'm at a Catholic mission trip, it's like, okay, I know that all these people are Catholic. So therefore, I can talk about like a theological misunderstanding I'm having. And I don't have to worry about judgment because they all believe the same thing that I do. Whereas if I went to a coffee shop and did that, heck no. I would hate to do that.
Mm. So you're also pretty aware of what people's basic logical understandings of things will be and what they and you can then appropriate your conversation to fit that. Like you wouldn't bring up the Catholic stuff at a coffee shop with someone that may or may not believe it, but if you're with somebody who is Catholic, then you know that you can talk about that kind of subject.
Mm, I'm not 100% sure if that's true or not because I feel like that's more of what an INTP would do. What I try to do is I try to start out with the basic, what kind of things do you enjoy, which I do with pretty much
Mm.
everyone that I talk to, unless usually if they're an extrovert, they ask me that question first.
Right. Yeah.
But to the introverts, usually I'm the one that starts the conversation because I'm, an outgoing introvert, which
Mhm.
is apparently a little bit rarer. And so then if the conversation wills it, then I just freely express my Catholic faith, whether they like it or not. I hate
Mhm.
political correctness. I hate having to
Right.
downplay and cutesify my language. I'm just like, I'm just going to talk about what I believe. If people don't like it, we'll get into a nice Socratic discussion.
Right.
We won't yell. We won't condemn. We won't act like a bunch of babies. We'll sort this out like rational, mature adults.
Right, bringing it back to that, this is what makes us human, the rational mind, our ability to separate the emotion from the conversation.
hmm
Yeah.
Which is why I have a really hard time dealing with dominant feelers that haven't developed their weaker functions yet. Because especially with, say, ENFJs and ESFJs, they tend to have a very volcanic approach to things. Like they feel it in a tidal wave.
Right.
Like my ex-girlfriend is ENFJ, and like
Oh,
when she
wow.
was angry, she'd be like hollering at me so much that I'd have to hide from the webcam.
Oh, wow.
And so I made a video on YouTube, like making fun of that trend called ENFJ, the emotional bulldozer, because it seems like they just like plow through with whatever they're feeling, and it's like always so extreme. And that's also the case with ESTJs and ENTJs,
Right,
except they
with
use
their
more
extroverted.
logic instead.
Yes. Yes, that's something that I've noticed as well, that extroverted judging, especially in the primary spot, is very much so like a bulldozer, like, that's they need you to, like, get on the same page as them or, like, they will make it happen.
Yeah. But what I like about introverted judging is that our stigma is always, okay, just let me think about it first
Mhm.
before coming to a conclusion. So I guess you could say like the IJs are the information gatherers. The EPs are the explorers, like the ones that
Mhm.
want to see everything, do everything, imagine everything. And then the IPs are system builders.
Mhm.
But they don't do it for everyone else, they do it for themselves.
Right.
And then the EJs are the enforcers, like the ones that are the bosses that tell everyone else what to do.
Right, exactly. That's a very good way of saying it. I would like to see that written down so that I can remember it. um, but actually, you were talking about interests, and that kind of made me want to segue into a conversation that we avoided talking about prior to this because I wanted to save it for while it was live, which is the fact that you are a writer and that you write novels. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about your novels, what they're about, what made you get started with writing them?
Well, I'm not just a writer, I'm also an author because I
Mhm.
actually have gotten a book
Oh,
published.
wow, that's awesome. What's the book
Uh,
called?
it's called Defending Life. You can find it on Lulu. In fact, that's the only place you can find it on. And it's basically where I looked at every book of the Bible except Leviticus because I found that book extremely boring. And I just looked at what does the Bible say about the pro-life stance. And so I collected as many verses as I could. During the editing process, I removed a few that were a bit too gruesome because I wanted it to be like high school level of tolerance mostly because I was coming out of high school when I started writing it. And basically it's just a more, how do I word this? A more, here's the fact, here's the verses, look for yourself.
So it's you expressing your opinion, but also using the authoritative information that you can prove like aligns with that, and this is the truth as it is, and you can now decide what you want to believe based off the information? Or are you still wanting people to believe the same as you about?
I think it's more so the fact that a lot of people, if they have a stance on something, it's usually not based on some kind of firm, rational foundation. It's usually based on like, well, this is what I personally feel about it, which is, of course, leads to a cult known as moral relativism, meaning like morality is based on the individual rather than an objective system.
Mhm.
So more so if I like to say, well, there is an objective system. Let's look at, one of the earliest objective systems of belief and see how that lines up.
Mhm.
Basically, I would also like to think, and I don't know if this is ISTJ or just me, but I'd like to think that let's say that there is no God and I die and find that out. Well, I'd rather live life thinking that there's a God than go life thinking there is no God and then figuring out, shoot, he actually exists at the end of my life.
Right. Right. Like it would be better to believe in something that doesn't exist than to not, with the off chance that it does, because then if you're living life as if it doesn't exist, then you might, you know, screw yourself over after.
It's like living life without knowing about oxytocin. You don't realize the damage you do with how intense of a hug or whatnot that you give.
Mhm.
So that's why ever since I learned about oxytocin, that's actually helped me argue with my atheist friends about like why you should save yourself until marriage, because scientifically speaking, it's going to cause a league of problems if you don't pay attention to the oxytocin output.
Do you want to explain that a little bit more? I haven't heard that before.
Well, I'd have to make it kind of, how do I word this? Kind of downplayed to how I would
Mhm.
usually play it because I want to try to keep this PG. But basically, oxytocin is released during any form of touch, even if it's as simple as a handshake.
Mhm.
And it's a chemical that's released in the brain. A lot of people get it mixed up with dopamine, which is, of course, the hormone that creates happiness and joy.
Mhm.
Oxytocin rather creates trust, but it decreases critical thinking. So
Mhm.
you'll trust the person with your life, but you might not necessarily be able to see the red flags as easily. You might not be able to say, this person is actually an abuser and actually unhealthy for me. So in other words, it creates a bond that lessens your ability to question it critically. So a lot of people, they say, well, we should really get to know each other intimately before marriage, but that's one of the biggest bursts of oxytocin. And so if you're not chaste before marriage, then you create this humongous bond that's so intense that if something happens to the marriage, it's like breaking an arm.
Mm.
You might as well save the pain until you've actually proven without the oxytocin that you can trust them, so that when the oxytocin comes, it becomes redundant.
Okay, I
So
see.
completely 100% scientific and logical, not even mentioning what the Bible has to say about all that.
Right. So you're kind of saying that like you should build the trust with somebody prior to adding a chemical bond of trust, which, when broken is harder than the logical trust that you might build with somebody.
hmm
Interesting. That's an interesting theory. I've never heard that before, but the way that you say it, it definitely makes sense. I mean, I definitely know that oxytocin is really important, and like being able to have bonds with people, it definitely gets stronger through like hugging them and through like holding their hand, etc. Um, Believe me, I held all my friends' hands in high school. That's very interesting. I'll have to think about that a little bit. I've never heard anyone say it like that before. So,
That's what a lot of
um,
people say about me is I always have a unique perspective that no one's thought of.
yeah. I appreciate that you take out the religious side of it when you're bringing in your ideas, because you're saying not only is it, something that's in the Bible, but there is, factual evidence scientifically that backs up my claim. I'm not just like going based off fully on this like faith, which you can easily,
Oh
um,
yeah.
throw out because you know that it's faith. This is like factual information
Well,
backing it
pretty much everything in the Bible has some basis on science,
up.
but because they hadn't discovered science back in Bible times, God didn't know how to, well, not that he didn't know how. They didn't know how to comprehend if he were to say something like, well, guys, I want you to watch out for the oxytocin. They would have been totally confused. God was known for
Right.
coming down to the level of the people and explaining things via their time, their customs. So that's why Jesus used parables, because they could relate to it. If he had said, if he had talked about pollution in the air during his time, the people would have been like, I'm sorry, what? So in other words, God was preparing them for this inevitable scientific revolution.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. I, again, have never heard anyone say that, so that's very interesting.
Like all the stuff that God did about purification, well, guess what? We're living in that time with the coronavirus. He was
Yeah.
preparing them for this very thing.
Hmm.
People might say God was so strict, requiring the priests to only eat this and clean up after themselves. Well, God was probably preparing them for the time when we would start having dietary restrictions.
Well, and also too, even like a couple 100 or 300 years ago, there was things like the Black Plague, which would have been incredibly infectious and incredibly contagious, which would have been, if you weren't more clean, definitely more likely to, end your life.
Well, a brief tangent for a bit. I hope you did not forget about the Q&A.
Oh no, I was just about to segue into it, so that's
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure you weren't like going off track, because
Oh
that's
no,
what I was
definitely.
looking forward to the most, actually.
No, actually, I had a question come in that I was kind of waiting until we got to the Q&A to
Oh,
answer.
shoot. I should have. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
it's okay.
No, I'm talking about myself, because as we were talking, I was like, why is no one talking? And then I realized I hadn't clicked the live comments.
Oh.
I have to catch up with all of these things that people have been saying the whole time that I didn't realize people were saying. So I am sorry for ignoring you guys, people. This is the first time I've ever used StreamYard. So
That's
I
okay.
guess let me catch up on these before. I'm a fast reader, so that shouldn't take
Okay.
a problem. Well, Mike, I hope you get to the homework eventually.
Don't let him fool you. He likes excuses to get away from
Well,
it.
Brett, I am sorry that this didn't happen a week ago. I had a dyslexic moment, so I marked the wrong day on my calendar.
We got our Sunday, Saturday mixed up. It happens.
Yeah, NF thoughts. I am pretty terrible at that. Commercialized personalized lab tests?
Oh, I think he was talking about the solution to the coronavirus. He and I think so much alike.
Oh,
How to
yeah.
solve this problem on a big scale, no matter how much involvement we actually have.
Sylvia thinks I'm an ISFP, or is she referring to someone else?
She originally said that she thinks you're an FP and then potentially ISFP, and then someone followed up saying that maybe you get in that loop of the SIFI a little bit more easily.
Oh, yeah. I get in that all the time. There's actually a name for it called Avoidant Personality Disorder, which means that we get into a mode where we become so distrusting of people in the past that we tend to avoid people. Oh, people thought I was an ENTP? That's hilarious.
Oh no, I think they meant your brother, because you said he has an introverted feeling, it seems like, but he also seems like an EP, which could be an ENTP or an ESTP, because they'd have tertiary FE, which would mean that they have like that childlike FE.
Mike is saying don't expect a rationale from FP type for almost anything. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but he loves his EFJs. Don't let him fool you.
Yeah. Bipolar. I'm not bipolar, but I have elements of it because it runs in the family. But I would say that if I do have a bipolar extreme, I'm good at keeping it to myself. I don't usually externalize. Do you TE or FI if you needed to? I'm not sure what that means. That's Bianca's question.
Maybe if Bianca's still here, she can elaborate on that. I think this was while we were talking about extroverted thinking and introverted feeling and extroverted feeling and kind of comparing them. So if she's still here, Bianca, can you elaborate?
I'm actually almost done. I just measured how much more of the comments I have to read.
Oh, nice.
This much.
Oh.
however big my pointer finger is.
That's not much at all.
Okay. Skipping across. I actually did that one time. Except we didn't skip across the parking lot, we skipped across a sidewalk. And yeah, I would have to agree. I would definitely have to agree. Oops, I just scrolled a little bit too far there. 3 truths. Yeah, objective versus subjective truth, that's a biggie.
Yeah, I think that this is a really interesting comment because this is kind of what you were bringing in, the undeniable objective truths about oxytocin and trust and how that's built, which is true whether or not people choose to believe it. Like, it's factually proven. Political truths and apparent truths, that's a little bit more wishy-washy, but I mean it is kind of objective when you look at it. And then your personal truths like philosophy, but that's getting into the more FI realm and TI realm, which is a personal
Well,
understanding.
I've caught up with all the comments, so if you want to segue into the Q&A, that would be totally fine.
Yeah, guys.
So
So,
just to reiterate from a couple of the samey questions that I get all the time, I am definitely a dude. I just don't like to imitate Johnny Cash as much as people would like.
technically, now this is coming from the singer's point of view. It's better to speak with a higher voice because it protects your vocal cords. Speaking too low actually makes them grate together and can
I
do
mean, none of you have heard me when I was 12. That was even worse.
damage.
Also, I am definitely an ISTJ because I just have learned to develop the introverted feeling a lot. So therefore, I've learned to like be more okay with expressing myself.
Mhm.
And um, as far as the dominant introverted sensing, that usually comes across more if people know me. But if you look at my YouTube channel, you know how it's very organized, factual. Like, I love talking about how things are compartmentalized, and that makes a lot more sense.
Mhm. So guys, this is a really great time that if you have any questions for Paul, now would be the perfect time to ask it while we have a little bit of extra time here at the end. If there's anything that you want to know about him or about ISTJs in general, um, this is the perfect time to ask. There's probably a little delay in the chat, so it might take a second, but let me go ahead and put up my Q&A banner. It's Q&A time.
I love that. What do I
Oh,
wish I could change about my personality? Uh, I would say I would like to be able to read people's emotions. Like, every now and then I can tell if someone is upset, but usually I have to like ask like 10 questions and usually I'm wrong.
so what does that process of like trying to figure out what people are feeling look like to you?
It involved like years upon years upon years of me asking lots and lots and lots of questions. Like, what do people do when they're upset? Like, what do people do when they're angry? How do I recognize this? Like, excessive questions that everyone else knows off the top of their head because it's social intuition. I'm just like, I don't get it at all.
So it's like you have to learn what the different facial expressions might be trying to express, like, and then ask, and even still, you wouldn't trust your understanding of their facial expression. You'd want to ask them more questions before you feel like you know what they're doing.
Because I usually don't trust my intuition. So that's why I ask people, like, okay, what are the signs so that they can tell me ahead of time so I don't have to trust my intuition. I can trust their judgment instead.
Mm. Do you have people who are more extroverted feelers in your life to help you understand people's emotions?
Um, Not as much as I'd like, but I would say that I have an INFJ friend and she's my best friend. Well, best female friend at the moment.
Mhm.
My best friend is currently considering going into the brotherhood, so there's that element of, oh no, please don't leave me,
Mhm.
element of it.
That sounds like it would be rough. How long have you guys been friends for?
As long as I've been alive.
Oh, wow.
We're literally crib babies because we're 2 months apart.
Oh, wow, that's crazy. I've never, known anyone that long.
Okay, I got 3 more questions.
Yes, we did,
I'm an ISFP. No, I'm not. Because ISFPs lead with introverted feeling, And they also have extroverted sensing, which means that they love the thrill of like the physical world, the parties. Me, I don't really like all that. Like I prefer to just like read a book or watch a YouTube video or like just relax. So even though I enjoy physical sensations, I don't seek them out like the extroverted.
Right. Like you were saying, you value your comfort a lot, your personal comfort, and that
Mhm.
kind of comes above a lot of other things.
How do I react to criticism? I do take things personally, but I would say that I don't often let it go overboard. How I react to criticism is I think about where the criticism is coming from. Like I think, okay, is the criticism peer pressure? Is it constructive? Is it mean? Is it ENTJ where it's just not even worth thinking about? So I think about like where is the criticism coming from? What is it trying to accomplish? And then I determine like, okay, should I follow the criticism or should I not? That's a good idea. Maybe I'll try it.
So you're considering the source of the criticism first and foremost before you look at even what they're saying. You want to know, is this a credible source? Is this someone whose criticism I should even trust and take a look at before you look at what it is and maybe potentially implementing it?
I'm sorry, could you say that again? I'm trying to do the
Oh,
questions and you at the same time.
what was I saying? Yeah, I lost it. I'm sorry.
Okay, so we got Brett saying, am I a strong rule follower? I love following the rules, actually. In fact, can hardly function if I don't know what the rules are. I usually go by the rules so much that sometimes I don't know how to respond without them. Like the teenagers say, "What? But Paul, what about this variable?" And I'll be like, "What variable? It's not the rules. What do I do?"
This is something that a lot of people don't realize, but like all of us who have any SI and TEFI, we all kind of enjoy following rules. Obviously, an ISTJ and ESTJ is going to like following rules more than INFP, ENFP, but to
Mhm.
a certain extent, we really do like rules and regulations to the external world. Like we need that to some degree.
Yeah, well, I would say the reason why rules are important, which is the next question. The second one is irrelevant at the moment because I'm still waiting to hear back from the results of a job interview. But the reason why rules are important is that it ensures that I don't have to guess. Like I can know how to live rather than having to figure it out on my own. Because like the other day, my best friend came over and he had a bunch of questions about how to use the stove, and I was like, I have no idea how to use this because I was trained how to use the one at my other house.
Okay.
So the
So
fact that it was a completely unfamiliar situation, I didn't know what to do, so I just asked my sister to take over everything.
Mm, interesting. So like if it's a new tool or something that you don't know the rules of, you don't want to guess at the rules. You don't want to try to figure it out.
Yeah, that's extroverted sensing. That would be in that case, for whoever said I was ISFP, that would be their grounds. The fact is, if I do try to futz around with everything, it usually takes me like a very long time to come to the realization of, well, no one's going to help me, so I guess I have to, but I don't really like it.
Mhm.
Like the fact that it took me years and years and years to figure out how to edit my videos on YouTube. All because I didn't think I should probably figure this out on my own. It wasn't until my friend Evelyn came over and was like, "Paul, you really should edit." I was like, "Well, I don't know how." So she said, "Well, let me teach you."
Mm, that's nice of her, actually.
Yeah, I like Mike's comment. Maybe you guys were born without brains. Not sure if he's referring to me or
No, I think he says that you seem very ISTJ. I think he's talking about other people. Mike.
well, I think the reason why a lot of people um, seem like they don't have brains is because they're basing it a lot off the stereotypes and not by the function stack. Because a lot of people have this mindset of like what it's like to be an ISTJ. Can we switch the question
Oh
down
yeah.
to the very last one? Do you feel awkward? Let me finish my sentence
Okay.
first. A lot of people have this view of what ISTJs are, and I think they almost like make it a self-fulfilling prophecy where it has to be their stereotype, or therefore the person can't be an ISTJ. But that's not how Myers-Briggs works. That's how stereotypes, and that's how emotions work. How Myers-Briggs works is it has a function stack. Dominant introverted sensing, very good at memorizing, loves to compartmentalize information, thinks about the past all the time. I think about the past so much that a lot of times I have what's called double vision, where I like see someone, and if they remind me of someone in my past, I'm like seeing that person at the same time. And sometimes I'll like have a conversation with the person in the past. Oh, okay. Thanks for clarifying, Mike. He said that he was referring to actual ISFPs.
Yeah, the people who think that you're an ISFP.
Yeah. And then
Well, and before you answer this next question, I wanted to follow up what you say because obviously I have a very similar feeling about that, but I think it's even further that people have stereotypes about cognitive functions as well. And if you don't match, like, you can say something that goes against their understanding of the cognitive function, and because it can't be fit into that personal understanding of the cognitive function, it has to be a different cognitive function, and then they find the one which it seems the most like, and they're like, that's your main function. I see this all the time when people are watching videos or when typing. They'll see all these different behaviors and all these things that people say, and they'll try to fit each thing that's being said into a cognitive function, and there's no level of strength with each function. It's just like, okay, they said 10 things about FI. Clearly they're FI, even though we were
yeah,
pushing ourselves to talk about FI in the conversation. It wasn't like something that you'd naturally be talking about anyone with. You're with this interview to talk about things about your function stack, rather than like if you were out and about with your INTJ friend, are you guys going to be talking about FI values all day long? Like,
not
probably
really.
not at all.
If anything, we'd be talking about video games and like what the latest news was, and like, oh, we should be excited about this new game. Or he'd be playing Three Houses, and I'd be pointing out all the enemy units that he missed and say, maybe it would be better if you moved your unit a little bit to the right, because then you'll get support with this unit.
Exactly.
So, do I feel awkward when sitting alone or eating alone? At a fast food restaurant, no. But at a regular restaurant, I would say that I only feel awkward if the people are being rude when they're passing by. So, if, for example, like a person just walks by you without looking at you or acknowledging your presence, I'd be like, okay, just because you're a thinking type, that does not give you permission to be rude. Like, you should at least have some semblance of common courtesy. Maybe it's because I was homeschooled. Maybe like other ISTJs are like, who cares? But I personally think that at least people should like not pretend like they're a logic robotic machine, and they should actually act like, because not only were we humans given a rational capacity, but we were also given emotions as well as reason. So that's why we should have a balance of both.
Mm. So like it's like the fact that they're not even acknowledging you that's upsetting, because why are they trying so hard to avoid even looking in your direction? What's the point of that? Why are they even doing that when all it takes is a quick like eye contact and a little like, hey, and then go on. I'm one of those people when I walk by anyone, I like smile, and I often say hi to people I don't know. Oh,
Well,
like strike up combos.
let's move it on to Eric Moore's really
Yeah,
quickly. But
absolutely.
before we move on to that, I want to follow up with that, like typing people on TV. I actually try to go with the inferior and the tertiary functions when I type someone on TV. Because, like, for example, one of my favorite shows is Once Upon a Time.
I like that show too.
I mean, my hair should give you some indication. And so, for example, when I see Emma Swan and I think about, how most people say she's ISTP, but then there's every now and then a few people, myself included, that say she's ISTJ. No, I'm not a New Yorker. That was one of the comments.
Yeah, I see.
And I think about, the tertiary function. So if Emma was an ISTP, then her tertiary function would be introverted intuition, which I guess kind of makes sense because she has her superpower where she can tell if someone's lying or not. But on the other hand, she also seems like she could very well have tertiary introverted feeling because she has her walls that she puts up to like
Hmm.
prevent herself from getting hurt again, which is a traditional thing that INFPs and ISTJs are known for, that avoidant personality disorder. They get hurt in the past, they remember it so fondly that they start avoiding people for fear of getting into that pain again. And also the fact that she like reminisces about how terrible her past was, and like she has a fear of innovation that seems
Hmm.
like more likely of inferior extroverted intuition.
Yeah, I haven't watched the show in a long time. I'd have to watch it again. I do remember thinking that she was definitely more of a logical person than a feeler, but that's about as far as I remember.
She's definitely a logic driven person, but I would argue even further that she's an ISTJ because when she does think about feelings, it's very like focused. Like, for example, she's like, I don't care what happens to you, I'm just going to protect my family.
That's true. That's a good point.
Like, she's very specific about who she feels for, as opposed to extroverted feeling where they kind of want to fit in everyone.
Hmm.
Um, I don't actually believe in following the rules blindly. I do question the source. Like in the Bible, there were certain things that God said in the New Testament that to this day I still question. Like, why did God say that? Like, for example, like what the baby boys had to go through. I was like, why? But the reason why he did that was because he wanted to set his people apart from the rest of the world as a way of like preserving, so that when Jesus came, like he could fulfill the Old Testament. Now,
Oh.
it's really hard to explain if I don't have like a whole bunch of time to delve into this deeply.
Hmm.
But basically, if I do question the rules, it's because I haven't fully explored all of the details.
Hmm.
Like, I'd want to look deep into every single aspect of the Old Testament, and then I'd want to study like what was the context that the Jewish audience got that our 21st century minds are losing in translation.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because, for example, in John 6, that's the ever controversial passage. But the thing is, that is also lost in translation because the first time Jesus says, eat my flesh, he, John was originally written in Greek. So he uses the pronoun of, just eating as in the general idea of taking in, which
Like consuming.
it could mean mentally, it could mean physically. It's an ambiguous translation. But
Hmm.
then when the people say, how is this man giving us his flesh to eat? They're mortified that he's preaching cannibalism.
Hmm.
Then he intensifies the Greek and says, you must gnaw on my flesh, which is the word used for animals that are tearing into a piece of meat and physically consuming it as if they're dying of starvation.
Hmm.
So, in other words, he's saying, okay, guys, I don't want you to only just think about it from a conceptual level. I want you to think about it from a physical level. And that's the only passage in all of the Gospels where his disciples walk away because they're like, this man is asking us to literally tear into his flesh. And because he didn't stop them, must be true. Of course, I'm not going to pretend that you guys have to be Catholics all in this moment, but that's at least explaining why do we believe that.
Hmm. I'm going to skip a couple of these questions because
I don't ride buses very much. I don't really daydream a whole lot at all. I want to. Well, actually, that's a question for you with Bianca's question. What
I think
annoys?
she's elaborating on what we had asked earlier. Um, that you use your extroverted thinking to explain your introverted feeling, and I use my introverted feeling to filter my extroverted logic.
What would it be like to explain extroverted thinking with introverted feeling? I'm trying to think how that would manifest. Probably something like, that girl hurt me. What would be the most logical way of getting back at her without negative repercussions? But then again, that's also drawing on personal experience. That's not outwardly explaining an external concept.
I don't know if you can use FI to explain anything because the way that I view FI is it's so non-verbal just in the way that it functions that like to try to put words to use it to explain anything would be almost I feel like you have to use TE to explain FI. Like even an
Yeah.
INFP who is lead FI, they have to use their extroverted thinking to externalize those feelings. And that's why, like, especially ISFPs, INFPs, they can get into that, like, they like bite back and they're like using all this logic to explain why they feel a certain way.
Mhm.
We can't just explain the feeling, like, there has to be the logic attached to it in some kind of external way.
What annoys me the most? Unclarity. Like if people are too vague or too not precise, that just completely drives me insane because I'm like, why can't you just speak in plain English, use proper grammar so that I can actually understand what you're saying? Because sometimes the lack of a comma actually changes the entire meaning of a
Right.
sentence.
So, like,
So,
if you're reading an email or something, or a comment or something.
yeah. So, like, a lot of people are like, why are you ISTJs such grammar Nazis? That's such a trivial detail. Why do you make a big deal out of it? Because, like I said, it changes the entire meaning of the sentence. So, we're reading a different intonation than you probably intended. It's like there's actually a prayer we say. It's called the St. Joseph's Novena. And the first time I read it, it said, I never weary contemplating you or Jesus asleep in your arms. And it's like, you or Jesus? Are you asking us to choose between the two? But it turns out that there's supposed to be a comma after the word you. So I
Mm,
never weary contemplating you. Or no, sorry. It was you and Jesus asleep in your arms. So I was like, how can both you and Jesus be sleeping in your arms at the same time?
right.
But it turns out it's supposed to be, I never weary contemplating you and Jesus asleep in your arms.
Mm.
So there's a lot of there's a lot of context with just that one comma.
Mhm. What's interesting is that I'm also a little bit of a grammar Nazi, but it's more in that it just looks wrong to me. I look at it and I know it's wrong and, like, it just looks wrong. Like, I can, like, figure out what it's supposed to actually mean. I can just take a second and reread it real fast and recontextualize it, like, that doesn't bother me. But there's something about, like, the way that it looks that just feels so wrong to me, and I'm just like, "Why? Why is this?"
The other thing that annoys me is door slamming. I really hate a lack of loyalty, and that's probably the introverted feeling going on steroids right now. And I've really tried really hard to make sure that the introverted feeling is, as you guys said, very thick.
Thick with 2 C's, by the way, thick
Yeah,
with
thick
2
with two
C's.
C's. I I don't like the stereotype of ISTJs being mean and robotic, and that was like something I deliberately made an effort to try to get around. And so that's why some people think I'm a feeling type when I'm at conferences, but then they hear me explain the rules, and they're like, "No, I was wrong. I was dead wrong because the way you yell at those teenagers and say, 'I told you to go to the bathroom 30 minutes ago, so you're just gonna have to hold it in the rest of the night because you didn't listen to me.'"
My boyfriend has a friend who's an ISTJ, and he's a corrections officer at a prison, and he's exactly this. Like, someone will come to him try to get something from commissary, and it's like after the cutoff, and he's like, "Well, were you asleep all day? Well, did you do this, and this? Oh, well, so you did have time to go sometime when it was open. All right, well then you go back to your cell because you're not getting it right now."
Yeah. So
Very
I don't like it when people say like, "I don't think it's possible for us to be friends anymore, and so therefore we should just drop contact." I hate that. I
yeah.
really like a loyalty.
That kind of, ability to just drop, I would at least want a solid explanation and a chance to work on it before just, like, cutting it off completely. I think that it's a little unfair to just cut people off.
Yeah, I like explanation, Socratic reasoning, discussion.
And, like, what's worse than not knowing why someone wanted to stop being friends with you? They just say,
Exactly.
like,
Like
"I
it
can't do this anymore. Why? What did I do wrong?"
Yeah, exactly. I'd like to know like, okay, if I'm doing something wrong, I wanna know how I can improve so that I can be better to the next person.
Exactly.
What convinced me of God's existence? That's a very long and involved question, but I would say the dumb answer that you're probably not gonna wanna hear is my mom said so at first, but then the older I got, the more my rational brain developed, and I began to look deeper into, like, the wording of the Bible, and also my own personal experiences, because like, I experienced a miraculous healing um, in my back in 2018, and my shoulders. And there were witnesses in the audience who knew what I was like just a few days before that happened. And the fact that I was able to do 10 push-ups on the stage, lift up 7 sheets, raise my arms fully in the air, whereas before I could hardly even lift a container of water bottles from Kroger. Oh, most of you don't know what Kroger is. That's a
Uh,
common grocery store around these parts.
yeah.
So
It goes by many names: Kroger, Fred Meyer, King Supers, all kinds of.
basically, if God didn't exist, then I would have no reason to live. So um, it just, again, that's such an involved question. I don't think I can give you a satisfactory answer, but it started out with my parents said so. And then as I got older, got to the age of reason, I was able to reason it out. And to a certain extent, it did go by faith, which is, it's hard for atheist ISTJs to accept that answer because it has to be like facts or nothing.
Hmm.
We as Catholics have to be willing to accept faith as an additional factor instead of just emotions and reason.
Hmm.
How do I take compliments?
Oh, whoops. That's the one. I saw the question mark and I clicked it. I didn't
I'm
even.
not dating at all, for the record. Not saying I won't date, I'm just very selective, but that's for another day. That's a very involved answer. How do I take um well, I have a hard time taking compliments because usually I don't know how to respond to them. I like compliments, but I like them to be something that would help me improve. Like if they're constructive compliments, like, "Hey Paul, I see that your video's audio has really improved." Or,
Mm,
Paul, I'm really glad that because of that speech that you gave, you were able to convince me not to commit suicide, where it's something where I know what the results were either from myself or with the others. Whereas if it's just something like, Paul, you have nice hair, I'll be like, oh, well, that's nice. I mean, it does look like Rumpelstiltskins, so I won't necessarily know how to respond to that.
Whereas if it had some kind of like consequence to that compliment, then you can see the context of the compliment and see that it had more meaning than just like some personal validation on you.
Yeah, that's actually what started my sub-series of ISTJ videos. It's called ISTJ info dumping.
Hmm.
It was from a phrase I used to say to my friend Danielle all the time because, like, she's very much a words of affirmation type of person. And so she would be saying stuff like, "Ah, you're so great. It's so awesome." And she'd be going on and on and on about all the stuff that she liked about me. And I'd be like, "You're just emotions vomiting on me, aren't you?" So then I talked about that on the Facebook page, being like, "Why is it that ENFPs just love vomiting their feelings?" So then an ISTJ responded, "But that's what you ISTJs do, but with facts." So then I said, "So we're info dumpers then, huh?" So then that led me to call my entire series ISTJ info dumping.
Yeah, I think we all have a little bit of info dumping in us. It just depends what kind of info we're dumping on people. Like,
Well, it's mostly just a nickname because a lot of ISTJs don't like talking about themselves online. And because I'm good at public speaking, I guess you could say I'm one of the few exceptions. And it's like a lot of people have what they think ISTJs are like, but honestly, most of them are dead wrong. Like they say, for example, oh, you ISTJs are robotic. We're only robotic if we're distrustful of the person.
mhm.
But once we have a feel of who they are and we like them, then you'll see the more wild, crazy side come out. Like if
Mhm.
I'm around my sister, I'm a joke a minute. But if I'm just meeting someone, I might be like, "Hello, the name is Paul. How are you? Is there anything I can do to assist you?" Which is where the robotic stereotype comes in. But that's probably because they don't have a friend who's an ISTJ.
Mhm.
You got to
Yeah.
remember, we have tertiary introverted feeling. It's not inferior, meaning there's going to be some smidgen of emotion that comes out, even if it's, as I like to word it, underdeveloped.
Mhm. And when you say that you guys protect it, especially against people that you don't really know, you're not gonna, like, expose that part of yourself to people that you don't know if you can trust or not because you don't have that experience with them to bring
Hmm.
into this to know what the outcome will be of exposing that part.
So the inferior intuition is basically saying, I don't see a future, so I'm not going to waste my energy on this.
Mhm. Which is a lot of you were talking about that a lot at the beginning too, like, when you daydream, it's only limited and you know, like, that there's no possible way that it can actually be implemented, and that's, like, where it stops for you. Whereas for me, I would be like, well, now I need to figure out a way to implement it. Like it needs to happen because I've thought about it.
Well, I won't say I never daydream because I do, but I'm also always aware of I'm also always aware of what's going on around me, so my daydreaming never impedes the real world. So, like, for example, when I'm walking down the street, my daydreaming's not gonna stop me from looking both ways, for example. Or
Or
if I see something in the sensory world that's appealing, the daydream is gonna stop because it's like, "Ooh, beautiful."
So like a pretty flower or like something like that.
Yeah, I mean, not as much as, like, the extroverted sensors do. Actually, I've heard a really interesting way of describing the difference between like EPs and ESFPs do it. Basically, ISTJs like are aware of the external world just like they are, but they're seeking out these external pleasures. ISTJs might see them, but they're just going to say, "Nah, I don't really see like why I should do this."
The point.
Like they might say, I don't want to go on a I actually personally love roller coasters. I
I
wouldn't
don't.
feel the need to seek out a whole bunch of roller coasters. You know, after I ride one, I'd be like, okay, that's enough. I could live the rest of my life without going on one. Whereas like an ESTP would be like, more roller coasters, more people, keep it coming. I'd be like, I'm fine after one or two.
Oh, that's funny.
So basically, we know our limits. We know, well, because we have such a good memory of the past, we're able to very accurately, or not accurately, we're able to like basically relive anything that's cool. So
Right.
we don't feel the need to keep reliving the moments because we're already doing it.
hmm Right. And that's interesting. I want to juxtapose that to us for a second to an ISFP because my sister's an ISFP. And one of the things she used to do all the time when we were younger is watch the same movie over and over and over and over again. And I'm talking like not just you know, when she's like 5. Okay, I'm not talking like kid. I'm talking she was like a teenager and she would watch the same movie over and over and over and over and over again. And I realized that I don't like watching the same movie too many times in a row because I already know exactly what's going to happen. I've already had this experience. But for her, she's reliving the experience of the movie every time she watches it. Whereas, for you or I, because of our introverted sensing, we're like, yeah, we've already done that. I'd rather have a new movie if I'm going to watch a movie than, well, I would rather have a new movie if I'm going to watch a movie. I don't know if you want to like consume a whole lot of new movies or what, but
I don't really like seeking out new movies, to be honest. Usually, if I do watch another movie, it's usually because it's from an existing franchise
mm,
or because it's based on something I'm already interested in. Like, for example, if they made a Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright movie, sign me up. That's like one of my favorite video games ever. But
mhm,
if it's like just some brand new movie that has a celebrity I like, I'll just be like, okay, that's cool that the celebrity's in, but the movie's not interesting, so I'm not going to watch it.
mhm.
That's why most of my friends, like whenever they suggest going to the movies as an outing, that's usually the first thing where I'll just put my foot down, almost literally, and
Right.
say, nah, I'd rather have some quality time.
Right. This is going back to that like understanding your or like caring about your comfort zone, right? Because like this new movie, you can see, what has been portrayed in that commercial and you can compare it to movies you've seen with similar descriptions or even things that you've chosen not to watch because of similar descriptions and then decide whether or not that fits into something you even want. And if it doesn't, why would you waste your energy watching a movie when you could do anything else that's more along the lines of what you want?
Yeah, I'd want to go with the familiar over the unknown any day. Every now and then, I might experiment, but it usually takes a very, very, very long time for me to get to that comfortability. Like for the longest time, I think for like 3 years straight, when I went to this young adult group, I always had to sit in the same chair. And if I didn't, I'd yell at the person who sat in the chair and
Oh
say,
wow.
"You're taking my seat, get out." And I just stand there and glare at them until they got out of my seat.
Oh my
Okay,
god.
cool, let's bring up the bottom one from 1, 2, free.
Sure.
I wonder if that's making fun of British people because that's how they pronounce three.
Mm.
They say like 3 different things.
So what can we learn from each other?
Okay, I think this is a double question.
Right.
So I'll go first because I mean it doesn't say inside the mind of an ENFP.
Right, exactly.
If you want to get inside the mind of an ENFP, just ask them to talk.
Pretty much.
I would say what I really like about ENFPs is their adaptability. I really like how you guys really love fun and you get me to like be okay with embracing something that could be fun that I've just never tried. Also, I really like how you guys no self-deprecation. That's nice. Um I would say one thing that's really impressed me about NFs in general is this thing that they like called personal growth, where instead of just resigning yourself to a weakness, you're willing to get yourself stronger. And I think the reason why most ISTJs don't like personal growth is because of the inferior intuition saying that's scary to change. Whereas I've learned to be more okay with saying, like, well, I guess that part of me could be better. And I'm going to answer a question that you guys are probably thinking but haven't figured out how to answer yet is, Paul, do you know how to use or do you potentially use more extroverted feeling than you should? Well, I try. I'm terrible at it, but I try because Jesus says, love one another as I have loved you. So that means figuring out how does everyone else want to be loved? A lot of times I epically fail, but I have to at least try.
Right. The attempt has to be made. I feel like from ISTJs, I can learn to to put my foot down, like you said, for a movie, because I would probably convince myself that there's something I'll enjoy about the movie because it's something I've never seen, because it's got people that I like. There's potential in that movie by default. So even if it's something that maybe isn't as interesting to me, if all my friends wanted to do it, I would find the potential in that movie and I would do it anyway, even if there's things I wanted to do more, because I would just like go with the flow and go with the group and whatever. So being able to put my foot down is something that's a little bit more difficult for me, which I've been working on lately, actually. But there's that, and then just being able to be okay with doing the same thing over and over again. That's another thing to learn from
So
my.
so if I'm understanding you correctly, you're basically admiring our routine and
Yeah,
our ability to stand up for ourselves and not get walked over. That's another thing is I realized that I am capable of standing up for myself and saying no, whereas ISFJs are usually like, I don't want to hurt your feelings by being confrontational, so I'll just shut up.
yeah. No.
How do I talk to people deeply by Stephen Campbell? Just as a heads up, I got minutes because I'm hosting right after this.
Okay.
So let's how about we
Okay.
double down on the questions so that you guys like can really get out the big ones. And if by any chance I can't get to every question, I would recommend linking to one of my basically any video I've done on Myers-Briggs. I have a whole playlist on my channel. Just say I'm from the stream and I have a further question for you, Paul. So how do I talk to people deeply? Well, the introverting side of me wants to base it on the personal connection of the person. So for example, if it's my friend Kara, I'm going to want to talk about how she's helped me to improve because she's an INFJ. They're all about improving and going forward. So I'd like to think, okay, Kara, well, since you've met me, this part of me has changed. So that makes her happy because she's an extroverted feeler. So she's going to be feeding off of my positivity. If it's my friend Danielle, she just loves hearing my good news. So basically, I just talk more when I'm around her. But as far as how do I talk to people deeply, I feel like you're asking from like ISTJs are so shallow. They don't like talking about philosophy. That's true. We don't. I hate talking about philosophy. But if I do talk deeply about something, it's something that I could actually do something about. So if it's
Mhm.
something like, what's the meaning of life? I'll be like, why does it matter? But if it's something like, would you rather get pizza or ice cream? I'd say, well, okay, well, how about we think about the nutritional value here, as well as the pricing, as well as which is better distance-wise. So I'd think about the practicality, or if it's something like, why do girls feel the need to wear makeup and why do guys not? Why is this a thing? But because that can actually help people, because
Right.
from my research, makeup actually makes you uglier when you get older. So I figure, girls are all about preserving their image, so why would they not want to preserve their image by going the cop-out route?
Mm.
I mean, that's just my personal observation. I could be wrong. I could have gotten my facts wrong, but I also have trouble with faces. So like when girls don't wear makeup, it's easier for me to recognize them.
Interesting.
So let's see. I don't even know what economics is. So
Mm.
I guess that answer would be no.
Oh
Would I rather fight a
gosh.
I don't think it would be possible to fight either one of them it's uh unless it's what, in heaven or something?
Also, why?
Well, okay, I'll pretend that I'm entertaining this type of TI type of question. I would rather not fight either one because I don't see the point in fighting animals. I've never hunted before, and I don't really want to hunt. I don't even like killing spiders, but I do it because my family doesn't like spiders, and so I don't want them to be freaking out. So I would say I'd rather fight neither.
Good answer.
I'm not sure what you guys mean by TE thinking there. Well, I guess that's kind of proving the point. Is like because it's my secondary function, that means I'm not always aware when I'm using it. Which is, of course, the definition of the dominant function is the like you do it without thinking type of thing.
Mhm.
Like, for example, when you sneeze, you don't say I am going to sneeze. Whereas
Right.
with the more inferior functions, like for example, when you do something routine, you actually have to put in the effort to say I am going to do this. I am going to have the same cereal every day. With an ISTJ, they just do it.
Right.
But if they say like I am going to have the box of cereal without the nutrition facts facing me, we have to actually be like, I hate this, but I'm gonna do it anyway.
Oh.
Well, guys, I have to I have to get going because my friends should be showing up any time now, and I don't want to keep them waiting.
Well, thanks so much for coming to my channel and for doing this. I think that we've talked about a lot of things that should help
I
break down
hope
some stereotypes that people have about ISTJ, which is, I just feel like stereotypes are the thing that in our community we need to work on breaking because they're
Yeah. Facebook really helps. If you go on ISTJ Facebook groups, you'll find that they are nothing like the stereotypes at all. They're very outgoing and energetic and very fun-loving because when the extroverted intuition takes over, that leads to the more silly random stuff. Yeah, I would not like economics based on what you're saying at the bottom. But yeah, guys, bring them to my channel. I have a whole Myers-Briggs playlist if you want to go on that. My channel is called The Catholic Nintendo Nerd, just in case you didn't get the memo.
And I've linked the channel in the description, and I'll find one of the playlists, the ISTJ info dump, and I will.
I actually
I'll
haven't
link
made
that.
I actually haven't made a playlist out of that yet. I just
Oh,
have Myers-Briggs in general, just
oh,
because
okay.
everyone's different in their preferences.
Yeah, I'll link that one then in the description. Once we quit this out, then I can edit and add that. Thank you all for coming and asking these questions. If you've never met an ISTJ, hopefully this gave you some insight. If you have met ISTJs but didn't know them closely, maybe again this helps give you insight. And overall, I hope you just enjoyed this conversation. I know that I did. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was great.
It was very organic. I have like some things planned out, but I'm actually glad that I didn't ask any of those questions and we just let the conversation go the route that it did. And I hope you guys all have a wonderful, amazing, fantastic day.
Yeah, peace out, folks. See
Bye.
you, Michelle.
Have a good one.
You too.